Hey guys, it's Diamond Dose. We're going to be back at it again today with another deck tech for you. We're going to look at Mono Black Umori, or Mono Black Devotion. Devotion was introduced in the old Theros block, and we just had a returning Theros block pretty recently, so it came back. This is the big Devotion payoff here, but let's start at the beginning here. So this is a Umori deck. So Umori the Collector is a 4-mana 4/5 legendary creature ooze with hybrid black and green mana. So you can spend either swamp or forest, and while we're playing mono black, we're going to be paying the swamp for it. So to be the companion in the deck, it has to each non-land card in your starting deck shares a card type. So all of our cards are creatures, so we can have him as our companion, excuse me. And then also, spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast, so all of our creatures will cost 1 less. A note, it doesn't make this card free. It won't make it go past lower than 1. So for example, it makes Priest of the Forgotten Gods cost 1 mana. It makes Grey Merchant of Asphodel only 4 mana. So let's run over all the creatures here. So at the 1-drop slot, we have Foulmire Knight. He also has an adventure side, Profane Insight. It's a 3-mana instant. You draw a card and lose 1 life. And Foulmire Knight is just a 1-mana 1/1 with Death Touch, so he helps with our devotion, and I'll explain what devotion means first here. So as it shows up here, each swamp and the mana cost of permanents you control counts towards your devotion to black, and we'll have cards that care about that devotion, so this adds a swamp to that. Serrated Scorpion does the same thing, adds 1 swamp to our devotion. It's a 1-mana 1/2 Scorpion, and when it dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life, so it's a little bit of extra reach. Priest of the Forgotten Gods is a 2-mana 1/2 1 swamp for a creature human cleric. You can tap it and sacrifice 2 other creatures, and any number of target players each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. And you add 2 swamp and draw a card. So this card is super versatile, and getting like opponent's creatures that have hexproof, for example, it can take care of stuff like that, and just help get you some extra value throughout the game. Also in the 2-drop slot, we have Tymaret, Chosen from Death, 2 swamps to cast him. He's a 2 and a star. He's a legendary enchantment creature, so you can't have 2 of them out at the same time. And his toughness is equal to the devotion of black. So there's the idea. We want to have a bunch of swamp mana out in the converted mana cost to make him have a big butt. You can also pay 2, 1 in a swamp, to exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards, and you gain 1 life for each creature card exiled this way. So this ability is super good. It can take out things like Euro, Kraxos, other things like the cat, Cauldron Familiar. It's just a really versatile card to have in the main deck. Now we have Yarok's Fenlurker. He's a 2-mana 1/1, 2 swamps, a creature horror. When he enters the battlefield, each opponent exiles a card from their hand, and you can pay 3 mana, and Yarok's Fenlurker gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this adds 2 for our devotion, gets a card out of our opponent's hand, and he can get bigger. He's just a really good dude. A new card for my Courier. This is Fiend Artisan, 2-mana 1/1 hybrid mana, so we're going to be spending swamp to cast him. Fiend Artisan gets 1/1 for each creature card in your graveyard, so as our creatures die, this will just get bigger. And you can also pay X in a swamp in our case, or a forest in any other case. You can tap it, sacrifice another creature, and search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. And you can only activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So we can sack things like Serrated Scorpion and get the trigger, and get things like Priest of the Forgotten Gods. It's a really good ability. There's a lot in here for 2 mana, that's why it's a mythic. At the 3-drop slot, we have Midnight Reaper. It's a 3-mana 3/2 creature zombie knight. It's for a swamp mana. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Midnight Reaper deals 1 damage to you, and you draw a card. So as our creatures die, we draw, they replace themselves. This card's really great to have out. Card from Throne of Eldraine. This card's super good. Murderous Rider is a 3-mana 2/3 creature zombie knight for 1 generic 2 swamp. Also has an instant attached to it called Swift End. It's a 3-mana instant, destroy target creature or planeswalker, and you lose 2 life. And by the way, if you don't know how these work, if this is in your hand, you can cast the instant first, and then you'll be able to cast the creature after. But if you cast it as it's a creature in your hand, you won't be able to use the instant form of it. You'll see that in action as the games go on. So the instant is destroy target creature or planeswalker, and you lose 2 life. So for just 3 mana instant speed, that's super efficient. And the creature side is a 2/3 lifelink, and when Murderous Rider dies, you put it on the bottom of your library. So this is just really good removal, and also it gives us 2 swamp for our devotion too. So this card's 100% a 4/0. We're running Ayara, a really big reason to be doing devotion because it has triple swamp. Ayara First of Locthwain. It's a 2/3 legendary creature, Elf Noble. Whenever Ayara First of Locthwain or another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You can tap her, sacrifice another black creature, and draw a card. So with it being legendary, we're running 3 of her. Really versatile card, help us get back in the game and rebuild if we get board wiped, and it's also extra reach to kill our opponent over too many blockers. Another payoff for our devotion here, or our first payoff so far, right? Well, Tymaret. It's not really a payoff, but this card here can really help us win the game. It's a Erebos Bleak-Hearted, 4 mana, 5/6 legendary enchantment creature. It's a god. So as long as your devotion to black is less than 5, Erebos isn't a creature. So once you get to 5 devotion on black, you can actually attack with this 5/6. That's indestructible. Also, whenever another creature you control dies, you may pay 2 life, and if you do, draw a card. So we have a bunch of different ways to draw cards in this deck, as you've seen. You can pay 2 mana also and sacrifice another creature. To do target creature gets -2/-1 until end of turn. And that's not a tap ability, so you can do that more than once if you have enough creatures to sacrifice to do multiple triggers of that to take out some bigger creatures. We have 2 copies of Nightmare Shepherd. This card came from the new Theros. It's a 4 mana, 2 generic, 2 swamp, 4/4 flying enchantment creature demon. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1, and it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. So this makes it so your creatures are really sticky. They keep their abilities. This makes it really pesky. If your opponent has like a lot of one-on-one removal, this card's just super good. And it can fly over for game a lot of the time. It's a 4/4 beater in the air. And here's our big win condition here. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, also known as Gary, to people that have played this game for a little longer. This was also in the older Theros, and it made its appearance again in the newer Theros. So it's legal here in Standard. So it's a 5 mana 2/4 creature zombie, and when Gary enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way, excuse me. So the idea is we have this out, her out, and let's say this out. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and when you play this, it counts itself 8, 9. You're doing a 18-point life swing, which is just absurd. So this is generally going to be our win condition, and obviously just attacking with creatures. For our mana base, we're running a total of 25 lands. 4 Castle Locthwain. If we're just running mono black, it's good to run 4. This comes in tapped unless you control a swamp, and you can tap it to add a swamp. You can also pay 3 and tap it to draw a card, and then you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. So generally you want to be empty-handed and start drawing with this to minimize the life loss. But drawing cards from a land is absolutely absurd, so we're certainly running 4. And then just 21 swamps. I like to use the Battle for Zendikar lands because that's about where I started to take this game seriously. It was around that time. That and Origins. Here in the sideboard, we have 4 Duress for the control matchup. So like Yorion decks, kind of blue-white control decks will bring this in. Let's see, 1 mana sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand, and you choose a non-creature, non-land card from it, and that player discards that card. So you can take out things like Fires of Invention, Teferi. Yep. Super good card. Really standard to have this in the sideboard of any black deck. We're also running 2 drill bits because we are running a lot of creatures, so this can be taken advantage of fairly easily. Also against control decks or fires decks. So it's a 3 mana sorcery. You can also spectacle it in for 1, which means if the opponent lost life this turn, you can pay 1 mana instead. So target player reveals their hand, you may choose a non-land card from it, and that player discards that card. So it's a little bit more versatile than Duress. So we'll bring this in against ramp decks, control decks, things of that nature. Running 1 copy of Hunted Nightmare. It's a 3 mana 4/5 creature nightmare with menace, and when Hunted Nightmare enters the battlefield, target opponent puts a death touch counter on a creature they control. So we'll bring this in if the opponent's not really running many creatures. 4 copies of Underworld Dreams. It's a 3 mana enchantment, 3 swamps specifically for our devotion, which is really helpful. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Underworld Dreams deals 1 damage to that player. So any control deck this will be great against. Things like Niv-Mizzet, not the new one, but the 3 island, 3 mountain one. Like against that kind of deck, it's really good also. And we're running 3 copies of Leyline of the Void. It is a 4 mana enchantment. If Leyline of the Void is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. Fair, right? And if a card would be put onto the opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So any graveyard-centric deck, we will bring this in and pretty much close them out of their entire game plan on the spot. So that is Mono Black Umori, Mono Black Devotion. So we're going to go ahead and play some games today. If you like this content and want to see more deck techs in the future, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.